I'll never forget the way James's face collapsed in that restaurant, like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. He was staring at Lucas, my little boy, my pride, my secret. Lucas was laughing, coloring dinosaurs on the kids' menu, and every time he said, "Daddy, look," it was directed at Michael, James's former best friend, my husband now. The word daddy broke James apart. It was like he was staring at his own reflection in miniature, yet watching another man live the life he had thrown away. But that's not where my story begins. To understand how I got to that moment, you need to see the picture I once lived inside of, the kind of picture-perfect life that makes neighbors envious, but hides cracks so deep they can swallow you whole. I grew up in Oregon, in a town so small that everyone knew who bought new curtains or who skipped church on Sunday. My sister Amanda was 4 years younger than me, and she was always the star of the show. She had golden curls, a mischievous laugh, and the kind of charm that made even teachers forgive her for failing tests. If she broke curfew, my parents said it was because she was just young and free-spirited. If I so much as got a B on a report card, I'd get a speech about discipline and responsibility. Still, I loved her. That's what older sisters are supposed to do, right? Protect the younger one, excuse her mistakes. Pretend the world's favoritism doesn't sting. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was the steady one, the planner, the responsible daughter. And then I met James. James was everything I thought stability looked like, wrapped in a charming smile. We met during my junior year of college. I spilled a latte all over his economics notes in a tiny cafe, mortified, and he just laughed. He told me later he had been staring at me for 20 minutes, working up the courage to talk. The universe, he said, forced our collision. He was ambitious, confident without arrogance, and he looked at me like I was the center of gravity in his universe. I was organized, cautious, practical. He was wild ideas and risky dreams. Together we balanced. At least I believed we did. Our romance burned fast. He proposed 2 years later in that same cafe, staging the exact table setup from our first meeting. I can still remember his words. "You spilled coffee into my life, and I never want to clean up that beautiful mess." I thought it was the most romantic thing I'd ever heard. Our wedding wasn't extravagant. It was intimate, warm, full of tears and laughter. For a while, we were the couple everyone envied. James started his marketing business, and I helped behind the scenes, writing proposals and proofreading plans. He called me his partner in everything, and I believed him. We bought a house in Portland, a little craftsman with creaky floors and a yard we swore we'd fill with children's laughter. On weekends, we painted walls, planted flowers, and planned the nursery for the baby we hoped would come soon. At night, James would pull me close and whisper about our future, the vacations we'd take, the backyard barbecues with friends, the empire of love and success we'd build. I fell asleep every night feeling safe, loved, certain. But life has a way of slipping cracks into perfect pictures, small, almost invisible at first. The first crack was Amanda. She called one night in tears. She'd graduated late, jobless, lost. She begged for a place to stay. Without hesitation, I offered our guest room. That's what family does, right? James hesitated, muttering about privacy, but Amanda was always good at winning hearts. Within an hour of arriving, she was flashing him her puppy dog eyes, promising to help around the house, and he gave in. At first, it was fine. She was messy, sure, but she cooked sometimes, made us laugh, and even comforted me when my pregnancy tests came back negative. She told me it would happen when it was meant to. She seemed supportive. But little things started to change. Amanda always looked her best when James was home. Her showers timed perfectly so she'd float past him in just a towel. Her job search suddenly focused on industries tied to James's work. She started joining him on morning runs, leaving me asleep in bed. Their inside jokes cut off the moment I entered the room. Still, I trusted them both. He was my husband, she was my sister. Some boundaries I thought were unbreakable. But then James started working late. His phone, once carelessly left on the counter, was glued to his side, locked with a new password. When I asked, he brushed it off. Stress, expansion, clients. I tried to believe him. I tried not to notice the distance creeping in, the way he looked at me with a flicker of disappointment every month I shook my head after another negative test. I told myself it was my fault, that maybe my body was broken, that maybe if I worked harder, smiled more, he'd come back to me the way he once was. On our 4th anniversary, I planned a perfect dinner, his favorite meal, candles glowing, me in the dress he once called goddess-like. He texted an hour before, "Stuck in a meeting, don't wait up." I sat alone as the candles burned down. Later that night, his phone buzzed while he showered. I never snooped, but something inside me broke that rule. The message was from Amanda. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. She suspects nothing." My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Even then, I told myself it couldn't mean what I thought. Maybe it was a surprise plan. Maybe I was paranoid. When I confronted James, he turned it around. How dare I invade his privacy? How dare I assume? He claimed they were planning a surprise anniversary weekend for us, that I had ruined it with my lack of trust. And because I loved him, I believed him. Or maybe because I couldn't face the truth yet. That night, lying awake beside him, I replayed every inside joke, every morning run, every look that lasted too long. The cracks in my perfect picture were no longer hairline. They were spreading, unstoppable. But the real shatter came weeks later. I wasn't supposed to be home that day. A conference had been canceled, and I wanted to surprise James with lunch. Amanda's car was in the driveway, music played upstairs. I climbed the steps, my heart pounding. And when I opened our bedroom door, my bedroom door, I saw them. Together, in our bed. The bed we'd chosen together after weeks of testing mattresses. Amanda saw me first. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, not in shame, but in annoyance like I was the one intruding. James turned, sheets tangled around him, and the only word he managed was my name, Kelly. Just that, my name, as if that was enough. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But all I could do was stand there, rain dripping from my coat, my conference tote slipping from my shoulder, staring at the ruins of my life. And that was the moment, the exact second, I stopped being the perfect wife, the forgiving sister. Because some betrayals carve scars you never truly heal from. But what James and Amanda didn't know was that fate had its own twist waiting, a twist they would never see coming. And it started with 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. I stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test until my vision blurred. At first, I thought my exhausted mind was tricking me. For months, James and I had tried and failed. Month after month of dashed hope, of ovulation apps and whispered prayers, of staring at blank white sticks that mocked me. And now, when my marriage was already shattered, when my husband had left me for my sister, that's when my body chose to say yes. I was still sitting on the bathroom floor at my best friend Sarah's apartment, clutching that little stick like it was both salvation and a curse, when she found me. She knelt down, wrapped me in her arms, and didn't say a word until my sobs turned into hiccups. "You're pregnant," she whispered, voice both tender and fierce. "And you're not alone, you've got me, we'll figure this out." But her words couldn't silence the storm inside me, because the truth was this baby wasn't just mine, it was James's, and that meant it was also connected by blood to Amanda. For the first time in my life, I wondered if keeping a secret might be the only way to protect what I loved. When I was a little girl, I believed family meant safety, but Amanda taught me otherwise long before James ever did. I was 8 when she was born. I remember the night vividly, the smell of hospital antiseptic, the squeak of my sneakers on linoleum floors, the excitement of holding a new baby sister. She was tiny, red-faced, wrinkled, and yet the entire world shifted to orbit around her. Everyone adored Amanda. My parents couldn't stop smiling at her. Relatives came with presents, neighbors with casseroles, strangers cooed over her in the grocery store. Meanwhile, I quietly slipped into the role of the big sister who was expected to help, expected to understand, expected to be patient. I learned early what the new hierarchy meant. If Amanda broke a vase, I should have been watching her more carefully. If Amanda cried in the middle of the night, I should fetch the bottle because you're old enough to help. When I brought home straight A's, my parents clapped politely. When Amanda managed a C after barely studying, they praised her brilliance. "She's just different," Mom would explain, smiling indulgently. "She's creative, free-spirited." Amanda learned quickly how to weaponize their favoritism. She'd pout, bat her lashes, and somehow get out of punishment every time. Once, when I was 12, she stole money from Mom's purse to buy candy at the gas station. I caught her. When I told, Amanda wailed until my parents turned on me. "Kelly, don't be so harsh. She's only a child." I was grounded for tattling. Even then, I kept protecting her. I told myself it was my duty, that big sisters were supposed to carry the weight, that if I just loved her enough, she'd learn to be better. But Amanda never wanted to be better. She wanted to be adored. By the time I met James, I thought I had left all that behind. In college, away from Amanda's shadow, I thrived. I earned scholarships, joined marketing clubs, mapped out a clear career path. And then James appeared with his boyish smile and his reckless dreams, and for the first time, someone saw me instead of Amanda's older sister. But the moment Amanda stepped into our married life, those old patterns returned. My parents praised her for finding stability when she moved in with us, ignoring the fact that she was jobless and freeloading. They scolded me when I complained about privacy, saying I should be grateful to help her. And when I noticed how close she and James were becoming, they told me I was being paranoid, jealous, even cruel. It was always the same refrain. Amanda could do no wrong, and if she did, it was my fault for noticing. The morning sickness started almost immediately. At first, I told myself it was stress, grief, leftover trauma from walking in on them. But the nausea was relentless, the fatigue bone-deep. The pregnancy was real. I debated for days, should I tell James? Legally, he had a right to know. But morally, spiritually, after what he and Amanda had done, did I owe him anything? Sarah tried to be practical. You should tell him, she urged. Even if he doesn't deserve it, the child deserves the truth. But my heart rebelled. I could still hear Amanda's mocking words when I caught them. James never really loved you. You were just a stepping stone, and maybe you're not meant to be a mother. Now here I was, carrying the child they swore I could never have, and instead of joy, I felt terror. When I finally gathered the courage to call James, his voice was clipped, annoyed. Why are you calling me? We're divorced, everything settled. I'm pregnant, I blurted, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. It's yours. Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then he laughed, not joy, not disbelief, a cold, bitter laugh. Nice try, Kelly, trying to trap me. Amanda told me you'd pull something like this. My throat closed. I'm not lying, I can prove. I don't care, he snapped. Even if it's mine, I want nothing to do with it. You made your bed, don't drag me back into it. And then he hung up. An hour later, Amanda called. Her voice dripped venom. You're pathetic. Do you really think a baby is going to bring James back to you? He's mine now. We're starting a family. Stop embarrassing yourself. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that I didn't want him back, that I didn't want her life. But I also knew the truth. They didn't want the child. Not out of love, not out of duty, not at all. And so I made my decision. This baby was mine, and I would protect him, even if it meant protecting him from his own father. The months that followed were some of the hardest of my life. My parents sided with Amanda, of course. Don't exaggerate, my mother scolded when I told her about the affair. Sometimes things just happen. Maybe this is God's way of giving Amanda what she needs. What about what I needed? What about the child growing inside me? Their silence on that told me everything. I stopped answering their calls. I focused on survival. I moved in with Sarah temporarily. She helped me apply for remote marketing jobs, drove me to doctor's appointments, and even painted a corner of her apartment pale green for the nursery. When I cried at night, she simply held me, whispering that I wasn't broken, that I could do this. And slowly, painfully, I began to believe her. One night, as I lay awake listening to the hum of Sarah's refrigerator, I felt the first flutter, the faintest kick, like a whisper from inside me saying, I'm here, I'm real, don't give up on me. Tears slid down my cheeks as I placed both hands on my belly. For the first time, I smiled without forcing it. I didn't know then how much strength I would need. I didn't know how many nights I would spend staring at hospital ceilings, praying for this child's safety. I didn't know the battles that awaited me years later when fate forced James back into our lives. But in that moment, I made a vow. I would raise this child with love so fierce it could heal every wound. I would give him the stability I never had, the protection Amanda had always stolen from me. And I would never, never let James or Amanda poison him. When my son was born after hours of grueling labor, the doctor placed him on my chest. Red-faced, crying, alive, I named him Lucas. And when I looked into his eyes, hazel like James, but brighter, purer, I felt something I had never felt before. Not just survival, not just love, but triumph. The first year with Lucas nearly broke me. Sleepless nights, endless crying, the constant fear that I wasn't enough. Those things haunted me like shadows. But every time I thought I couldn't do it anymore, I would look down at him, tiny fists curled against his chest, and I knew I had no choice. He needed me, and that was enough. What I didn't expect was Michael. He had been James's best friend once, the kind of friend you call in the middle of the night when your car breaks down. I'd known him through Sarah, my best friend and his younger sister. Back when James and I were married, Michael was always around, tall and quick-witted, with a calm presence that made people feel safe. He and James had built parts of the business together, laughing late into the night in our home office while Amanda and I watched TV downstairs. When my marriage exploded, I thought Michael would vanish too. After all, he was James's partner, his confidant. Why would he choose me? But to my shock, he stayed. At first, he helped in small ways, carrying groceries when I was too pregnant to manage, fixing a leaky faucet in Sarah's apartment, bringing me herbal tea when morning sickness knocked me flat. Then, after Lucas was born, his support deepened. He drove us home from the hospital. He learned how to swaddle a newborn from YouTube tutorials. He came over every Saturday with a bag of groceries and a goofy smile, insisting he was there just to help. One night when Lucas was about 3 months old and colicky, I broke down crying on the couch. "I can't do this," I whispered. "I'm not strong enough." Michael sat beside me, gently took Lucas from my arms and rocked him until the baby's cries softened. "Kelly," he said softly, "you've already done the impossible. You survived James. You're surviving Amanda. And you're raising a beautiful little boy. You're stronger than you think." It was the first time I believed it. The years passed, and Lucas grew into a whirlwind of energy. His laughter filled the tiny Seattle apartment I rented after leaving Portland. He had James's sandy hair and dimpled smile, but his eyes, those were mine. Wide, curious, and full of questions. By the time he was 4, he loved dinosaurs, peanut butter sandwiches, and bedtime stories with Michael. He would run to the door shouting, "Mike's here," whenever he heard the familiar knock. Eventually, the word shifted. One night after Michael tucked him in, Lucas wrapped his small arms around his neck and whispered, "Good night, Daddy." I saw the shock flicker across Michael's face when he stepped back into the hallway, but it was quickly replaced by something else. A tenderness so deep it almost broke me. That was the moment I knew. Lucas didn't need James, he already had a father. I thought I had left Portland behind forever. The city was too full of ghosts. My parents who defended Amanda, the house I had abandoned, the memories of betrayal burned into every street corner. But then Sarah announced her wedding. She begged me to come, promising it would be different, and for the first time I felt strong enough to face it. Michael agreed immediately. "We'll go as a family," he said, squeezing my hand. Lucas was thrilled, excited to wear a fancy suit like Daddy. We arrived at the hotel the day before the wedding. It was a grand, historic place downtown, with marble floors that echoed beneath our shoes and chandeliers that sparkled like frozen fireworks. Lucas bounced on the bed in our room, squealing with delight. I remember thinking, we made it. We survived everything. We're happy. Nothing can touch us now. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. That evening we went down to the hotel restaurant to meet Sarah and her fiancé for dinner. I wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, but Michael kept giving me that look, the one that made me feel like I was the only woman in the room. Lucas clutched his coloring book, skipping between us, his little hand snug in Michael's. The restaurant was warm and softly lit, with the scent of roasted garlic and fresh bread drifting through the air. Couples murmured over wine, waiters glided between tables. It should have been just another family dinner. Until I saw them. James and Amanda. They were seated by the window, their hands intertwined across the table. Amanda's belly was rounded, obvious even under her designer dress. She was pregnant. My breath caught in my throat. I froze mid-step, the air turning thick around me. Michael noticed immediately. His hand slid to the small of my back, grounding me. "You okay?" he whispered. I forced myself to nod. I wanted to turn around to run, but Lucas tugged my arm. "Mommy, look, dinosaurs on the kids' menu." His excitement pulled me forward. We walked to our table. I thought maybe, just maybe, they hadn't seen us. But then James froze. His water glass hovered halfway to his lips, eyes locked on Lucas. I knew that look. Recognition, horror, shock. Amanda followed his gaze, her smile faltering. Her eyes narrowed, cold and sharp when they landed on me. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Lucas, oblivious, was coloring happily, leaning against Michael's arm. "Daddy, look at my T-Rex," he chirped. The word sliced through the air like a blade. "Daddy." James's hand trembled. He stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. and before I could react, he was walking toward us. The room seemed to shrink as James stopped at our table. His eyes never left Luca's. His voice was low, strained. "Kelly is he." Michael straightened beside me, subtly placing himself between James and our son. "I'm Michael," he said firmly, extending a hand. "Kelly's husband." James didn't take it. His eyes were still glued to Luca's, who looked up with innocent curiosity. "I'm 4, Lucas said proudly, sensing the attention. "Almost 5, I'm going to kindergarten soon. Right, Daddy?" He looked at Michael, grinning. James flinched like he'd been struck. His voice was a whisper, trembling with disbelief. "Daddy." The color drained from his face. His eyes darted between me, Michael, and Lucas. "Is he my son?" And here's the question that still echoes in my mind years later. What do you do when the man who broke you finally realizes what he threw away? James's question hung in the air like a gunshot. Is he my son? The entire restaurant seemed to still. Forks paused midair, conversations faltered, even the soft music from the speakers felt suddenly too loud. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Yes," I said softly, my eyes never leaving his. "Biologically, he's yours, but in every way that matters, he belongs to me, and to Michael." For a moment, James just stood there, pale and unsteady, like someone had ripped the ground out from under him. Then anger sparked in his eyes. "You had no right," he hissed. "No right to hide this from me, to let him," he gestured toward Michael with a trembling hand, "raise my son." Michael's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "You gave up that right the moment you rejected him. Remember your words, James? Even if the baby is mine, I want nothing to do with it. You made your choice." James's face twisted as though the truth itself stung. He turned his fury on me. "You kept him from me, you lied to me, you let him call another man," his voice cracked. "Daddy." Before I could answer, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "James." Amanda had risen from her seat and was marching toward us, one hand braced against her swollen belly. Her eyes were daggers as they swept over me, then landed on Luca's with a strange mix of calculation and disdain. "So it's true," she spat. "You had his baby, you've been hiding it all this time." Lucas frowned at the sudden hostility. He leaned closer into Michael's side, instinctively seeking protection. Michael's arm tightened around him. "James," Amanda continued, her tone shifting to one of forced calm, "we should leave. This isn't the place for this." But James didn't move. His gaze was fixed on Lucas, drinking in every feature, the dimple, the cowlick in his hair, the long fingers. The resemblance was undeniable. "I want to know him," James said finally, his voice rough. "He's my son." My heart clenched. "You don't get to claim him now," I whispered. "Not after what you did, not after what you said." The words were out before I could stop them. The dam broke. "You think you can just walk back into his life? You left me for my sister. You humiliated me. You destroyed our marriage. And when I told you I was pregnant, you laughed in my face. You said you wanted nothing to do with him. You made your choice, James. Don't pretend you didn't." Gasps rippled from nearby tables. A waiter awkwardly tried to look busy. The world was listening, but I didn't care. My truth was no longer a secret I was forced to swallow. Amanda's lips curled into a mocking smile. "You always were dramatic, Kelly. Maybe if you weren't so cold, so obsessed with control, James wouldn't have needed me." The words sliced deep, even though I had heard variations of them before. My chest tightened, heat flooding my face. But before I could respond, Michael spoke. "You're right about one thing," he said evenly. "James needed you. He needed someone willing to feed his ego while he tore his family apart. But Lucas," he looked down at our son with a softness that made my throat ache. "Lucas needed a father who would never abandon him. That's me, not James, not ever James." Lucas looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. "Daddy?" he asked quietly, sensing the tension but clinging to the one anchor he knew. "Yes, buddy," Michael whispered, his hand ruffling his hair. "Always." James's face crumpled at the sound of that word again. For the first time, his anger faltered, replaced by something else, grief. But Amanda wasn't finished. "You're not taking this away from us," she snapped. "James has rights. We'll go to court. We'll prove." "Prove what?" I cut her off, my voice sharp. "That he abandoned his son, that he denied him, that he left his wife for her sister while pretending his hands were clean. Go ahead, Amanda. Show the world who you really are." Amanda's mask cracked for just a second, rage flickering in her eyes. She grabbed James's arm. "Let's go," she muttered through clenched teeth. But James didn't move. His gaze was still locked on Lucas, who was now coloring again, blissfully unaware of the storm raging around him. "Kelly," James whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, don't shut me out. He's my son. I need—" His words faltered. "I need a chance." The world tilted. My chest tightened. I remembered every insult, every betrayal, every time Amanda was chosen over me. I remembered James's cold voice on the phone when I told him I was pregnant. I want nothing to do with it. And now here he was, begging. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my answer. But I didn't give one, not yet. Because before I could speak, Lucas tugged at Michael's sleeve. "Daddy, can I have ice cream?" The innocence of the question shattered the tension. Michael smiled down at him, his expression softening. "Finish your dinner first, buddy, then ice cream." James's face collapsed completely. The word daddy had destroyed him. He realized in that moment that he had been replaced, not by force, not by manipulation, but by choice, by absence, by the life he had thrown away. Amanda tugged his arm again, harder this time. "James, now." Finally, he let her pull him back toward their table, but not before turning one last time, his eyes burning into mine. "This isn't over," he said. And as he disappeared into the crowd, my hands trembled under the table. Because I knew he meant it. That night in our hotel room, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Unknown number. I didn't need to check to know who it was. The messages came in quick bursts. "You stole my son. You'll pay for this. I'm going to court. You can't stop me. He's mine, Kelly. You can't erase me." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening with panic. Michael took the phone gently from my hand. "Don't answer," he said firmly. "We'll deal with this together." But I couldn't shake the fear. James had money, connections, influence. And Amanda would stop at nothing. I lay awake long after Michael and Lucas had drifted to sleep, staring at the ceiling. My son's peaceful breathing filled the room, but all I could hear were James's words. "This isn't over." And deep down, I knew he was right. The morning after James confronted us, I woke with a pounding headache and a knot in my chest. I hadn't slept. My phone buzzed until sunrise, James alternating between threats and pleas. "He's my blood. I'll take you to court. Don't shut me out, Kelly, please." I wanted to throw the phone into the hotel fountain to pretend his words couldn't touch me. But I knew better. James was stubborn, dangerous when cornered, and Amanda, she would push him until there was no line he would cross. Michael noticed my silence at breakfast. He leaned closer, his hand covering mine. "We'll talk to a lawyer when we get home," he said firmly. "James doesn't have a case. Lucas is legally mine. Adoption papers are airtight. They can't undo that." I nodded, but inside, dread gnawed at me, because logic didn't matter to people like James and Amanda. They thrived on chaos. That afternoon, while I was helping Sarah with her last-minute wedding prep, Michael took Lucas to the park across from the hotel. The plan was simple: burn off some energy before rehearsal. I was folding programs in the bridal suite when Michael's name flashed on my phone. But it wasn't his voice I heard when I answered. It was panicked, frantic. "Kelly, it's Sarah. I'm with Michael. You need to come to St. Vincent's Hospital now. It's Lucas." My knees buckled, programs scattered across the floor. "What happened?" "Playground accident. He fell hard. They're doing x-rays now." The phone slipped in my sweaty hand. My vision tunneled. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Hospitals have a smell that clings to your clothes. Antiseptic, stale air, faint despair. I rushed through sliding doors, heart hammering, until I saw Michael packing the waiting room, his shirt smeared with dirt, his face pale. "Where is he?" I gasped. "They're checking his arm," Michael said quickly. "He fell off the climbing frame, hit the ground hard. He cried, thank God he cried, but his wrist looked bad, maybe broken." His voice cracked. "Kelly, I swear I only turned for a second." I grabbed his hand. "Stop, it's not your fault, just tell me he's okay." "He's strong," Michael whispered, "like his mom." Moments later, a nurse led us back. Lucas sat on a hospital bed, his small wrist wrapped in temporary gauze, cheeks tear-streaked. When he saw me, he reached out with his good hand. "Mama," he whimpered. I held him, my heart aching at the fragility of his body in my arms. "I'm here, baby. I've got you." The doctor entered, holding a chart. "Good news," she said. "Clean break, but nothing complicated. We'll set it in a cast. He'll heal fully in 6 weeks." Relief flooded me so hard my knees almost gave out. But then the doctor hesitated, flipping through the chart. "I do need to ask something. His intake forms, they list Michael as the father. Is that accurate?" Michael and I exchanged a glance. "Yes," I said firmly. "He's Lucas's legal father." The doctor nodded, scribbling notes. "Good, we just need to keep records consistent. There was some confusion because another name came up, James." She checked the paper again. "James Carter." Ice shot through my veins. "Someone called earlier," the doctor explained casually. "Claimed to be Lucas's biological father, asked about his condition. We didn't release details, of course, since he's not on the legal record, but I thought you should know." My blood boiled. James, he had found out. He had dared to call. Michael's jaw clenched. "He doesn't get to do that, not after everything. We'll handle it legally." But as I sat there, stroking Lucas's hair while the nurse fitted his cast, a dark realization settled in my stomach. James wasn't going to stop, not now that he had seen Lucas with his own eyes. The next day should have been filled with wedding joy. Sarah walked down the aisle radiant in lace, her smile brighter than the stained glass windows behind her. Michael stood tall beside me, holding Lucas carefully in his tiny suit, his cast painted blue. But I couldn't focus. Every laugh, every toast, every song was muffled under the pounding question in my mind. What if James actually takes us to court? That night after the reception, we tucked Lucas into bed and sat by the hotel window overlooking the city lights. Michael held my hand. "I talked to Mark," he said quietly. Mark was his attorney friend. "He'll represent us if James files anything, but Kelly, even if it doesn't get far, it could still get messy. Custody hearings, DNA tests, courtrooms." My chest tightened. "Lucas doesn't deserve that." "No," Michael agreed. His thumb brushed my knuckles. "But if it happens, we fight. We show every record, every piece of evidence. We prove who's been there for Lucas from day one. Not James, me, you." I stared at Michael, tears burning my eyes. "You've given him everything, everything James never did. But what if a judge—" My voice broke. "What if blood matters more than love?" Michael cupped my face, forcing me to meet his steady gaze. "Then we remind them that blood doesn't raise a child. Blood doesn't stay up at night with fevers. Blood doesn't kiss scraped knees or teach him to ride a bike. Love does, and love wins." We returned to Seattle the next morning, exhausted but clinging to each other. I thought maybe things would calm down, but James wasn't done. 2 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived at our door. Legal paperwork, petition for parental rights. I wanted to tear it to shreds, but Michael carefully opened it. "Let's see what we're dealing with." Inside was a demand for DNA testing and visitation rights. Amanda's name appeared too, petitioning as his wife, claiming she wanted Lucas to know his true family. My stomach churned. They didn't want Lucas, they wanted control. Revenge, proof they hadn't lost. We took the papers to Mark's office. He flipped through them unimpressed. "It's weak," he said. "James denied paternity. There are phone records, witnesses. He's been absent for years. Michael's adoption is final. Judges don't favor deadbeat dads who show up years late, but," he tapped the papers, "it will still go to hearing if they push it. Be prepared." Prepared? How do you prepare your child for the possibility of being yanked into a tug-of-war he never asked for? That night after Lucas was asleep, Michael held me as I cried. "I can't lose him," I whispered. "I can't let them win." "You won't," Michael promised. "We'll fight and we'll win together." But deep down, a chilling fear echoed. What if love wasn't enough? The hearing date arrived quicker than I expected. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and tension. James sat across from us, Amanda beside him, her belly round, her smile smug. Lucas was in the childcare room unaware. Thank God. The judge listened as our lawyer presented records. Proof of James's denial, texts, call logs, even Amanda's venomous voicemail threatening me if I ever mentioned the pregnancy again. James's lawyer countered with claims of changed circumstances, of a father's right to know his child. But then the judge leaned forward, flipping through the file. "Mr. Carter, you not only denied paternity, but explicitly stated you wanted nothing to do with this child. Why now?" James faltered. His gaze flicked to Amanda, who whispered something sharply. Then he straightened. "Because I made a mistake. People change. I want to be a father now." The judge's eyes narrowed. And yet Mr. Michael Green has been raising this child since birth, legally, emotionally, financially. The court considers what's best for the child, not just biology. Amanda's face tightened. The judge's words weren't a ruling, not yet, but they gave me hope. For the first time, I saw cracks in their arrogance. Still, as we left the courtroom that day, James caught my arm. His grip was desperate, almost trembling. "Kelly," he whispered, eyes red, "please just let me see him once, that's all I'm asking." I pulled free, my heart pounding. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I found myself wondering something dangerous. Would letting him see Lucas, just once, be mercy, or a mistake I could never undo? When James grabbed my arm outside the courthouse and begged to see Lucas, my chest squeezed so tight I thought I might collapse. His voice cracked with desperation, but I could still see Amanda hovering just behind him, her hand clamped around her belly, her eyes cold and calculating. I yanked my arm free. "You don't get to just ask now," I hissed. "You forfeited that right years ago." But when I climbed into Michael's car, my hands still shaking, doubt seeped in like poison. What if Lucas grew up and asked about his biological father? What if, by keeping James away, I was robbing him of answers? That night, long after Lucas had fallen asleep clutching his stuffed dinosaur, I sat at the kitchen table with Michael. Rain tapped against the window, the city lights smeared and blurry. "I don't know what the right thing is anymore," I whispered. Michael reached across the table, his warm hand covering mine. "The right thing is whatever protects Lucas, not James, not Amanda, Lucas." "But what if Lucas deserves to know the truth?" My voice broke. "One day he might look at me and ask why I kept his father from him. What do I say then?" Michael's jaw tightened. "You tell him the truth, all of it, that James walked away, that I stayed, that biology doesn't make a father, choices do." A week later, my parents called for the first time in months. "Kelly," my mother said, her tone sharp, "Amanda told us what happened. You're being unfair. James has a right to see his child." I nearly dropped the phone. "Unfair? Unfair. He cheated on me with my sister, abandoned me when I was pregnant, and told me he wanted nothing to do with the baby. You call that a father?" "He's changed," she insisted, "and Amanda says you're poisoning Lucas against them." My laugh was bitter, hollow. "I don't need to poison him, he has eyes. He sees who shows up for him, and it's not James, it's Michael." There was a pause, then my father's voice, quieter, almost pleading. "Kelly, sometimes forgiveness is better for children. Maybe let him meet James just once." I hung up before I could scream. The betrayal from my parents cut deeper than any legal threat. They had always favored Amanda, but this was choosing her even when the stakes were my son. That night, Michael found me crying in the bathroom. He crouched down, his hand brushing away my tears. "They don't get to define family for you anymore," he said softly. "We do. Lucas does." For the first time, I realized Michael wasn't just my partner, he was my anchor. The second court hearing was scheduled 2 weeks later. By then, James's desperation had shifted. He no longer stormed with anger. Instead, he arrived looking exhausted, shoulders hunched, eyes bloodshot. Amanda, on the other hand, gleamed like a predator, her smile tight, her voice dripping confidence. During recess, James approached me cautiously, glancing around like a man sneaking from prison. "Kelly," he whispered, "please just listen for a second." I folded my arms, wary. "Say what you need to say." His Adam's apple bobbed. "Amanda doesn't know I'm telling you this. Things between us, they're not what you think." I almost laughed. "You think I care about your marriage?" "No," he said quickly. "But you should know, Amanda isn't interested in Lucas for his sake. She just wants to win, to prove she has everything you lost. She told me having Lucas under our roof would destroy you completely. That's all she cares about." A chill ran down my spine. I believed him, because it sounded exactly like Amanda. "Why are you telling me this?" I demanded. James's shoulders sagged. "Because I'm starting to see what I gave up. Lucas, he looks just like me, but he's happy, confident. That's not me, that's you. And him." He flicked his eyes toward Michael, who stood nearby, watching protectively. For a brief, dangerous second, I saw the James I once loved, the dreamer, the boy who laughed when I spilled coffee on his notes. But that boy was long gone. "Do you want forgiveness?" I asked bitterly. "No," he admitted. I want to know him, even a little." Before I could answer, Amanda appeared, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. "James," she snapped, "stop wasting your breath." Her eyes landed on me, icy and smug. "He's mine now, he does what I say, and trust me, Kelly, you won't win." James's face twisted, but he said nothing. He followed her like a shadow. I stood there, trembling, torn between fury and pity. That evening, after Lucas was asleep, I told Michael everything. His face darkened. "Of course she wants to win," he muttered. "It's always been a game to her, but for us, this isn't a game, this is Lucas's life." "What if James really means it?" I asked softly. "What if he really does want to change?" Michael's hand found mine. "Even if he does, Kelly, it doesn't erase the years he wasn't there. It doesn't erase the nights you cried alone. It doesn't erase the fact that Lucas already has a father." I looked at him, my heart swelling with both gratitude and fear, because I knew he was right. And yet, the question still gnawed at me. Would denying James completely make me the villain in my son's eyes someday? The final hearing loomed. Tension buzzed like static in the air. The courtroom was packed with lawyers, clerks, even curious spectators. I sat beside Michael, clutching his hand until my knuckles turned white. The judge called James to the stand. He swore in, his hands shaking. At first, he recited the script his lawyer had given him, how he had changed, how he wanted to make things right, how Lucas deserved his real father. Amanda watched him with hawk-like intensity, nodding approvingly. But then the judge asked one question that shattered the performance. "Mr. Carter, if you truly wanted to be a father, why did you tell Ms. Kelly Carter at the time of her pregnancy that you wanted nothing to do with the child?" The courtroom fell silent. James froze. Amanda's eyes burned into him, silently commanding him to lie. "But he didn't." His voice cracked. "Because I was a coward, because I thought Amanda was what I wanted, because I convinced myself Lucas would be better off without me. And maybe he is, maybe." His eyes flicked to Michael. "Maybe he already has the father he needs." Gasps echoed through the room. Amanda's face twisted with fury. "James," she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear, "shut up." The judge banged the gavel for silence, but the damage was done. Amanda's mask had slipped. James's confession hung heavy in the air, and for the first time I felt the tide turning. Michael squeezed my hand, his voice low but fierce. "See, truth wins." And in that moment, I knew we weren't just fighting for custody. We were fighting for honesty, for Lucas's right to be free from Amanda's poisonous grip. But I also knew Amanda wasn't finished. Because women like her don't lose gracefully. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the scratch of the judge's pen as she wrote her notes. James's words still echoed in the air, raw and unvarnished. Maybe he already has the father he needs. Amanda sat stiffly beside him, her face a mask of barely contained rage. Her nails dug into his arm hard enough to leave marks, but James didn't flinch. He stared at the floor, shoulders bowed, as though confessing had finally crushed whatever pride he had left. The judge cleared her throat, glasses low on her nose. "I've heard enough." My breath hitched. This was it. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice firm, "you had every opportunity to be a father to this child. Instead, you rejected him, denied him, and abandoned your responsibilities. Only now, years later, with Ms. Green's marriage and adoption established, do you seek to claim rights. That is not in the best interest of the child." Amanda's head snapped toward her, eyes blazing. "You can't do this. He's his biological father." "Mrs. Carter," the judge cut her off, voice sharp, "this is not about biology. This is about stability, consistency, and the welfare of the child, and this court will not disrupt a healthy, established parental relationship." Tears blurred my vision. I squeezed Michael's hand until my knuckles ached. The judge continued. "Mr. Green is recognized as Lucas's legal father. Custody remains exclusively with Ms. Kelly Green and Mr. Green. Mr. James Carter, any future involvement will be at their sole discretion." The gavel struck, final, irrevocable. Relief crashed over me so hard I nearly collapsed. Michael wrapped his arm around me, steadying me as I sobbed quietly into his shoulder. For the first time in years, I felt safe. But across the aisle, Amanda exploded. "You weak, pathetic fool," she hissed at James, her voice loud enough to echo. "You had one job, one chance, and you ruined it. You embarrassed us. You embarrassed me." James flinched but didn't argue. He just sat there, hollow-eyed, letting her venom pour over him like acid. The bailiff escorted them out. Amanda's shrill protests faded down the hallway. When the doors finally closed, silence fell again, a silence heavy with finality. In the weeks that followed, the dust began to settle. James sent one letter, handwritten and shaky. Kelly, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I won't bother you again, but please tell Lucas one thing, that I loved him even if I was too broken to show it. I'll carry that regret for the rest of my life. I never replied. Some words don't deserve answers. Amanda, true to form, tried one last stunt. She posted a long, venomous rant on social media painting me as the villain, claiming I stole her husband and trapped him with a baby. Her lies gained traction for about a day, until people remembered the timeline, the affair, the betrayal. Comments turned against her and she deleted everything. After that, she disappeared from our lives. Healing wasn't instant. Trauma doesn't vanish with a gavel strike. For months, I jumped every time the phone rang. I had nightmares of losing Lucas, of courtrooms, of Amanda's voice echoing in my ears. Michael suggested therapy. At first, I resisted. Telling myself I had survived, I was strong, I didn't need help. But one night when Lucas woke crying from a nightmare about bad people trying to take him, I realized I couldn't let my pain bleed into his innocence. So I went. Week after week, I sat in a quiet office and poured out everything. The betrayal, the favoritism, the scars my parents had left, the anger I still carried. Slowly, I began to let go. Michael came to sessions with me sometimes. We worked through my fear of trusting again, of always waiting for the rug to be pulled from under me. He never pushed. He just held my hand and reminded me every single day that love could be steady. And Lucas, my sweet, resilient boy, thrived. His cast came off, he bounced back stronger than ever, his laughter brighter than before. We told him only what he needed to know, that sometimes people make mistakes, but he was safe, he was loved, and he would never, ever be abandoned. That was enough for him. Months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I found myself watching Michael and Lucas in the backyard. They were building a Lego tower, both with matching looks of concentration, their heads bent together. Careful, Michael murmured, guiding Lucas's small hands. I got it, Daddy, Lucas said proudly. Michael smiled, ruffling his hair. Something in my chest cracked wide open. Not with pain this time, but with gratitude so fierce it brought tears to my eyes. This was my family, not perfect, not traditional, but real, built on love, on choice, on scars that made us stronger. Sometimes, late at night, I trace the invisible scar Amanda and James left behind. It will always be there, a reminder of betrayal, of cruelty, of parents who chose the wrong child. But it no longer defines me. What defines me is the boy sleeping peacefully in his room, safe and secure. What defines me is the man beside me who chose us when he didn't have to, who became a father not by blood but by devotion. I used to think betrayal was the end of my story. Now I know it was only the beginning. So here I am telling you my truth. My husband left me for my sister. He broke me in ways I thought I'd never recover from. But years later he discovered the son he never knew, and by then it was too late. Because someone else had already stepped up. Someone who showed me that family isn't always about who shares your blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up. And sometimes, the people who shatter us unknowingly guide us toward the love we were always meant to find. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most, I want you to know this. Healing is possible. Happiness is possible. You can build something stronger from the ashes. But now I want to ask you, Sparkles, what do you think? Should I ever allow James to meet Lucas, even once, so my son knows his origins? Or is it better to protect him completely from that chaos? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if my story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our community of survivors who turned pain into strength. Because in the end, scars don't just remind us of where we've been. They remind us of how far we've come.